Today let's dive into patch 13.3 and see how all those new changes affect our tier list this week. This one is a general tier list focused on covering all ranks, but if you prefer to see low and high elo separately, then check out our website by clicking the link in the description. We're going to start off with that top lane as always, and in the S tier we still have a fair few champions. Singed, Shen, Fiora, Camille, Darius, Olaf, Akshan, Jax, Gangplank, Udyr and Rengar. Not really any big system changes to this role this week, and mostly just a few champions getting adjusted. K'Sante is getting some more nerfs this week, and to be honest, these could actually send him over the edge. He already has a pretty average win rate, he's really good in pro play, but aside from that, he's just not actually that successful right now. So these nerfs to his Q knockup duration, his Q stun duration, and his W are probably going to hurt him significantly. He's been a really turbulent champion since his release. Sometimes he feels absolutely bonkers, completely broken, and impossible to kill, and then other times you kind of just kill him on repeat. Well, the latter is probably going to happen far more often now, so let's see how Riot respond to this over the next week or so. Kayle is one of the other top laners getting impacted this patch, and she's actually getting some buffs. They're increasing her passive movement speed, her E's on hit damage ratio, and her E missing health active too. The thing is with Kayle though, she's always really good when she scales up, she just doesn't actually get the chance to too often because of how vulnerable her early game is. And these changes aren't really going to impact that. The movement speed might help her out a little bit and the mid game might be a little bit better, but in general she still needs to get to that level 16 before she can really start doing stuff. So we aren't going to change her placement this week. Finally, we just have to mention just how broken Olaf still is. Another patch with no nerfs to this champion means he's still one of the best champions you can go for in that top lane. And if you do main Olaf and you get ahead in the early game, well, no one can really stop you. You press your ultimate, you press ghost, you charge into an enemy team, and you delete everyone while staying alive at the same time. We're surprised with each patch that goes by where Olaf isn't included in those notes. So if you are an Olaf one trick, keep abusing him while you still can. Moving into the jungle now then, and in the gold tier we still have Maokai and Udyr. In the S tier we have Elise, Fiddlesticks, Amumu, Nunu, Zac, Echo and Evelynn. Riot are bringing in some nerfs to early ganking junglers this week with some adjustments to treat gold and experience as well as increased tower damage in the early game. It's going to be really interesting to see just how much impact this has on the meta. But one thing for sure is it will help those already strong power farming junglers like Udyr, who is once again getting through this patch with no nerfs at all. Udyr is the biggest raid boss in the game right now. He comes out of the jungle with 200 CS, kills everyone and absorbs all their damage they try and throw at him. And it's super surprising that he isn't getting any adjustments this week. If you're looking for a jungler to ban this week, we'd recommend banning this guy. Lee Sin is finally getting some buffs. He's been sitting around a 46 to 47% win rate for as long as we can remember. Now this is skewed a little bit because he is difficult to play and difficult to be effective on, but still, that's a bit depressing, let's be honest. Lee Sin is one of those junglers that is a ton of fun to play. It's why he's one of the most popular junglers and champions in the game, but he's also so much fun to watch and so much fun to have around in general. These buffs are pretty good too. They're giving him some extra AD ratio on his Q and his E, and his E slow is now higher at max rank 2. Sometimes when it comes to certain champions like Lee Sin, a small buff is all it takes to make him completely relevant again. He's going to sit in the B tier for now, but if you are good enough, he could be much higher. If you do want to get guides and the best builds and runes and so much more for every single champion, then don't forget to download our desktop app. You can import it all straight into your client and get playing those builds that all the pros are using. All you got to do is click the link in the description to get started. Another struggling champion with a pretty abysmal win rate at the moment is Kayn, and he's also getting some buffs this patch. Kayn is one of those champions that has periods of absolute domination and periods of being a bit underwhelming. And Riot do have to be really careful when they change it because sometimes they can really send him over the edge. This buff though is all about his Shadow Assassin form. So if you are an enjoyer of zooming around the map and one-shotting squishies, then Blue Kayn could be back with a vengeance. Just like Lee Sin, he does take a bit of practice though, and he is going to stay in the B tier for now. And let's see how he looks a week later. Trundle has also been really struggling for a while ever since they overnerfed him a little while ago. He was really dominant for ages and then there few too many nerfs and he just disappeared off the face of the earth. They're buffing his W's cooldown but also adding one of the most random changes you'll ever see included in a patch note. His dance emote now scales with movement speed. We don't have a clue why, but it is what it is. Finally, we just have to talk about Zac. Now he's getting some pretty big nerfs this week and so is his main mythic item to go for, Radiant Virtue. They're nerfing his E's damage and his W's AP ratio. And we're really happy that he is getting these nerfs because he's been dominating the jungle for far too long now. We still think Zac is going to stay in the S tier though. He might just have to change his build a little bit and go back to being a full tank rather than building all this damage that he can go for. Although there is a different build option too, all about Evan Shroud, which could still be relevant. But at least he's not in that god tier anymore. Let's move over to the mid lane now, and in the god tier we have Anivia. In the S tier we have Kassadin, Cassiopeia, Gangplank, Tristana and Akshan. Rod of Ages and Seraph's Embrace are still incredibly strong, hence why you can see some of their biggest abusers in this S tier. Don't forget that the new Aurelion Soul rework is here as well this week, so get ready to unleash your inner Cosmic Dragon because honestly it's a ton of fun to play. You'll be happy to know, guys, that Kassadin is getting nerfed again. His E cooldown refresh, his E damage, and his ultimate damage at all stacks are being nerfed. And these are the nerfs that he probably should have had in that last patch. Now, due to his itemization, we still think he's going to be an absolute terror to play against, but we have brought him out of that god tier and just kept him in the S tier. Kassadin is still one of those champions that if he does get strong, if he gets to level 16, he's still going to be super hard to beat. But at least now he might not be quite as broken as he has been for the last few weeks. One champion that we haven't seen for quite some time is LeBlanc, and she's getting some nice buffs this patch. Some of her mana in her base stats is going up, her Q mana cost is going down, and her ultimate cooldown is going down at early levels too. Now, LeBlanc doesn't really have the best spot in this meta though. It's not really focused around burst at the moment, it's focused on durability, and there's a ton of tanks and even tanky mage items too with Rod of Ages. But at least now you can pick her a little bit more often, and in the right game she could still pop off, especially if you are good enough on her. We've popped her in the B tier and we don't think she's going to be too much better than that for the time being. If you haven't tried Tristana mid, then you're seriously missing out. She is a fantastic counterpick to so many of those really strong mid lane mages at the moment. And even though she was already strong, ever since those AD carry itemization changes, she's now even better. She spikes incredibly quickly, she has crazy amounts of burst, she tears through plates and towers in no time, and she snowballs and stomps and wins so many games from that mid lane. So give her a go and let us know how you get on. Speaking of Tristana, let's move into that bot lane tier list, and it does look very similar to our predictions in the big AD carry itemization patch. This role is now incredibly impactful, and that's why you can see so many marksmen in that S tier. Kai'Sa, Twitch, Caitlyn, Samira, Draven, Tristana, Jhin, and Xayah are all stupidly strong right now. There's no real major balance changes to this role this week, but the support adjustments will definitely have an impact. Ezreal is one of those champions that is all about how good you are on him, and that really defines his placement. Now, he's A tier at the moment, but if you are good enough, he can shoot up to the S tier, and if you're a very average player, he's probably C tier. He has a ton of different builds you can go for. You can go for that traditional Muramana Triforce build, you can go for the Navori Quickblades Kraken Slayer build with Essence Reaver, or you can even go for those funky hybrid builds like Essence Reaver, Muramana, Eclipse, and so on. Wrapping your head around that itemization is one thing, but he can be stupidly strong if you get it right. And if you can dodge tons of abilities with your E, you can land all those skill shots with your Q and your W and ultimate, and if you can spam those auto attacks too, then you're going to have a lot of fun and success with Ezreal. He still is a really safe pick to pick early on in Champion Select, and as long as you've had enough practice on him, he's always a good choice. Another patch with still no Vayne buffs, and so many of those Vayne one tricks are really not too happy about this one. Vayne has had a really underwhelming win rate for quite a while. She was stupidly good at the start of last season, then she took a fall, then she was good in the durability patch, then she took a fall, and she's never really recovered. Now, you would think with so many tanks running around that Vayne would be good, but the problem is her early game is so weak, and with all those other AD carries dominating the late phase and spiking super hard, she just simply can't compete with them. Now, if you are obsessed with playing Vayne and you really do want to play her despite these things, you're probably going to have to wait for the perfect matchup and the perfect draft. Or you might have to make the swap to top lane for now. And there's only one thing that could be worse than maining Vayne right now, is actually maining Lucian. The infamous Lucian-Nami combo is just nowhere near as good as it once was. And if you don't have Nami alongside you, he's just even weaker. Despite his crazy popularity and his really high pick rate, he's just not really having the best time at the moment. In the majority of ranks, he's got a fairly unimpressive win rate, and we do expect to see some changes to Lucian some point soon. But unfortunately, he is just one of those champions that's very difficult to balance. Don't get me wrong, if you get the right game, the right draft, and you've got everything you need to play Lucian, he can still be viable. But this just isn't happening very often. And why would you pick him when you can pick any of those champions in the S tier? Because there's a ton of choice. Let's move on to that support role now, and in this patch we've got some pretty big, intriguing changes coming in here. In the S tier though, we have Janna, Blitzcrank, Sona, Rakan, and Maokai. Ever since the durability patch 12.10 last season, engaging aggressive supporty tanks haven't really been having the most success. And this week Riot is giving a ton of those champions some pretty juicy buffs. Alistar, Braum, Nautilus, Thresh, and Pyke are all receiving adjustments, mostly to mana costs, base stats, and damage. And it's really going to be interesting to see just how much of a shift this has in the bot lane meta. We aren't actually going to move any of these champions tiers just yet. They're likely to stay where they are, but just become a bit stronger and a bit more reliable. So keep your eyes peeled, and if anything ends up being completely bonkers, then we'll let you know in next week's tier list update video. And if you do want to see a bit more about those support changes in depth, we'd advise you to check out Freak's breakdown video over on his channel. The Radiant Virtue nerf will not only hit Zac, but it'll also hit those support champions that have been abusing it like Bard. This item has just been stupidly strong so far this season, and the increased cost plus the item cooldown is likely to make a really big difference, especially to that support role. Tenacity is being nerfed again this week too, so crowd control reliant stun bots like Leona are going to get hit once again. Unfortunately though, Leona missed out on the support buffs this week and hasn't really been having a great time ever since patch 12.10. Now we do expect her to jump on the buff train soon, but for now she's just not quite up to par with the rest. Amumu is also getting nerfed this week with less damage on his E and more mana cost on his Q. In the jungle we don't think this is going to affect him too much, but in that support role he's going to move down from S to A this week. AD carry supports have been destroying solo queue games and even pro play for a few weeks now, and to combat this slightly, Riot are nerfing Umbral Glaive. This is no way near enough to stop people playing champions like Ashe, Caitlyn, Jhin and even Kalista in the support role, and Spectral Scythe is just still too strong. Tons of damage, free poke, easy gold, and yeah, if you played against a bot lane that knows how to abuse it, you'll know just how hard it is to beat. One plus side is, it is likely the tank support buffs will help combat this slightly, but for now, be careful. And that's going to bring us to the end of our patch 13.3 tier list video for you. We hope you agree with our selections and let us know in the comments how you feel about the changes coming in this week. Don't forget to download our desktop app to get access to all of our free content and stay ahead of the meta. Thanks for watching guys, and as always, take care.